Thank you for that, gentlemen. Zach will be looking forward to that dig into the Ontario market to take a look at what is driving those volumes right now. But right now, we're going to bring up Alan Adler, who was our bureau chief in Detroit, and we're going to be talking about SPACs, a tale of two SPACs, I believe. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning, guys. You know what? I think we have to call them de-SPACs now because, they're not SPACs anymore. They are actually public companies. But it's sort of a tale of two companies going in opposite directions. And it's sort of interesting. Yesterday morning, I guess, or maybe even over the weekend, we saw that Lordstown Motors, which we pay attention to them primarily because they have been sort of spun out of GM way back when and kind of stood up very quickly as a SPAC during the real heady days of special purpose acquisition companies and basically ran through a lot of money, ran into problems, got a hard hit from the folks at Hindenburg Research, which said that, they were making up sales orders and things like that. So it's been a very rough ride for them anyway. A year ago, they filed a notice with the Securities and Exchange Commission that said a notice of going concern, which basically means we may not be in business a year from now. And that looks like it could come to pass, really. I don't want to predict here, but basically as part of announcing their earnings report on the 9th, they said, we don't have a deal yet to sell the plant to Foxconn. This is a Taiwanese company that makes Apple iPhones and is trying to get into the electric vehicle business. Lordstown is out of money, basically. It doesn't have any money. It doesn't have any products right now. So it's looking to, do a joint venture with Foxconn and sell them the plant that basically GM gave to Lordstown for $230 million. Well, Foxconn's already forked over $200 million of that money, and basically they don't have a deal yet. If they don't get a deal, they'll probably end up, or they could end up with all of the assets of Lordstown. And what that means going forward, nobody knows. I mean, Foxconn does not have a big track record in terms of building electric vehicles at this point. They have a deal up in Wisconsin that didn't go anywhere. It wasn't for electric vehicles, but they do have a next generation Fisker product that they're supposed to build, and as well as they want to be the contract manufacturer for the Lordstown, which is a commercial pickup truck. You all noticed this week, of course, that Ford is now selling the F-150 Lightning, which is going to pretty much crush everybody in that space anyway. So this is a very, very tough situation. We may be witnessing the final days of Lordstown here. We may not be, but boy, it seems like it's just hanging on by a thread over there. Go ahead. Mike, you want to say something?
I was about, it sounded like a pause to me. I'm not sure. But no, I wanted to dig in a little bit with Lordstown, right? Because so what were they unable to capitalize on? What was the issue here? I mean, it sound in the other part, well, let's just stick with that, right? What was their downfall? What led them astray?
Okay, a couple of things. One is an engineering deficiency. They were never properly set up. A guy named Steve Burns, who once upon a time was the CEO at Workhorse Motors, another company that is struggling but may or may not make it through. Not a SPAC, but may or may not make it long term. We'll see. But Steve Burns set this up, went into GM when GM was having trouble with the UAW and said, hey, I'd like the Lordstown plan. I want to set this up. Well, he put in a bunch of folks who, quite honestly, weren't able to pull off what they were trying to do. They were going to do a pickup truck, and I'm not going to get deep into the tech here because I don't fully understand it. But basically, they were going to do an electric pickup truck that had motors or hub motors at each wheel. This is not a great idea for a truck that has a lot of movement and, is bouncing around and going to construction sites and things like that. At least we don't think it is. Sam Al-Samid, who's both a mechanical engineer by training and an analyst at Guidehouse, has been critical of this since the very beginning. And, now they may have a person at Ed Hightower who knows what to do. He's a former GM exec who ran the very large business at GM in SUVs, but it may be too late. And the problem is that even if they have the right people now, they don't have any resources really to move forward. They've got another $30 million that's due them, but they're basically going to have to get somebody else to do all of this if, in fact, it comes to pass. And you're dealing, again, with a company in Foxconn that doesn't have a lot of background. Yeah, they're great at making, iPhones, but does that translate to being able to make electric vehicles? And we're going to find out over the next few weeks. May 14th is the next deadline. If they don't have a deal by then ideally, Foxconn can just basically say, okay, turn over all your assets to us because we gave you all this money. So it's quite honestly, it's a mess.
It sounds like Foxconn's got pocket aces, right? I mean, they're pretty much in a driver's seat, right?
Yeah, it does. It sounds a little crazy the way it all came together. I mean, there's been so many players. We'd take all morning to discuss who's come and gone over there. But this is one of these SPACs that came together very, very quickly. And I mean, weeks. It went from sort of announcement to completion, $700 million in money raised by a Diamond Peak special purpose acquisition company. And they brought it all together so quickly. And it just doesn't feel like it was ever solid. The other one, in contrast, though, is Nikola. Right? We've been talking a lot about Nikola, and there's reasons to talk about them. Typically, when you're going to scale your business, you need money, and Nikola's made that very clear. Yesterday, they announced an investor that came in for what's called senior convertible debt, which is not a term that people talk about in public, but basically it means that they're getting a big loan from an investor to essentially, will sell them either stock or pay them back in cash based on money they bring in to keep scaling the business. Last week, they tapped another equity line of credit they have. So they have a good bit of money now in hand or available to them to keep scaling the business, which is the kind of stuff that, growing businesses do. I mean, the idea of borrowing money is not a bad thing if, in fact, you're borrowing it to build your business. And those are a couple moves that Nikola is making right now that, kind of build on last week when we were out there and we saw the plant, we saw the production vehicles. Now they can keep going. And, it's interesting. There's one little thing in the SEC filing that I thought was interesting that I put in the story was that this loan, and I call it a loan, it's debt basically, that they're getting restricts Nikola from going over $500 million in borrowing, either through sale of new stock or whatever. They actually, put a shelf registration where they said, we're going to set aside this number of shares to sell in the future of about $1.2 billion. So they have put a little bit of a cap on that, which suggests that they think maybe they're going to make enough cash to pay this back early, and then kind of free up some of the ability to borrow as they keep moving forward. I mean, there are big cash calls over there. There's a plant to finish. There's hydrogen to make. There are hydrogen stations to build, and maybe $25 million in revenue coming this year. That's their projection from the trucks that they're going to build. So it's getting started, and it's gone way farther than a lot of us ever thought it would.
Mm. Yeah, back in the day, I would have bet the other way between these two. Sure. Raising money, getting this $200 million loan, they raised 196. They got about $396 million in cash right now. That's just been infused, really.
Michael, it's more than that because they already had some on their books that they haven't
Right, but I'm just
yet.
saying recent infusions around $396 million. So are we just, and we've talked about this before, right? Reputation is all smooth and clean now, right? I mean, they're moving forward. It would seem.
I think it is. They're going to take a hit again when the Milton trial happens, which right now is scheduled for July. This would be their founder, Trevor Milton, who is going on trial on fraud charges. Unless there's a settlement, unless the trial gets kicked further down the road, that kind of thing. They're going to get a little bit of a smear out of that, but it's not really going to affect them much. I think what they're doing now with real customers and real revenue and kind of real investors is that they're a little bit beyond a startup, probably. They'd be an early stage business, probably by definition. But it is interesting to see. I mean, they seem to be telegraphing what they're going to do and then doing it. And nothing satisfies markets and investors more than doing that. Now, you'd have to say, okay, so why is their stock $7 a share compared to, way back when it was over 90? Well, part of it is because every stock is getting hammered right now. Mm-hmm. There's very few safe havens out there for equity, and and interestingly enough, all of their senior executives are working for $1 a year right now, rather than any kind of regular salary, and are taking kind of betting on the come here for 3 years out that things will the stock price will have done better, because if it gets up to $25 a share, which seems a long way off, and then ultimately to $55 a share, they'll all be really, really well off. But right now, they're working for next to nothing, and that's a pretty big risk. But they've held on to most of their key executives, and they added this guy, Michael Lohscheller, who is the new president. I suspect he probably will succeed Mark Russell as CEO at some point. Lohscheller ran Opel in Europe under GM before it was sold to Stellantis, and also most recently was at VinFast in Vietnam, which is an electric car startup. So lots of background there. He's got the Nikola Motor job right now, which basically is, I think, sort of understudy to Mark Russell, learn the truck business and then take it over at some point. One more bit of news this morning. We just saw Cummins earnings just came out this morning. For the fifth quarter at least, they beat revenue estimates, and badly. What they're doing is something we're seeing in a lot of earnings reports is they're raising prices really across the board because their input costs are so expensive for engines and for the other businesses that they have, that they're showing big numbers in revenue, and a little bit behind on the net income side. A pretty good business here in North America, slowdown in China where they're big. And they did take a big write-off, $158 million write-off for its Russia business for Cummins. They have exposure there. So a write-off there.
Yeah. So in closing, Nikola, are they emerging as the front runner in the EVs right now and for autonomous vehicles?
That would be tough to say that, Michael, simply because they're small, right? I mean, they're small, and everything in electric trucks right now is small. Arguably, Volvo would be your clubhouse leader at this point, not just here, but overseas. They've got hundreds of orders in the bank. They're building now. They've just released their European products, for orders to actually be able to place orders just yesterday, I think. And so Volvo, Daimler, but I think Nikola is a player. It'd be very difficult to call them a leader, but they're a player, and they do have, at this moment anyway, the longest range of any of the electric trucks, under perfect conditions, which are never existent, right?
No.
350 miles on a single charge. But even if you're talking 250, you're ahead of the pack in terms of how far you can go. That's a great range for a drayage truck. It's good for regional haul. And, this is something where, you were in the truck recently, but they can get it on pretty good.
Oh, yeah. No, 250 miles for a cab over, city work, short haul type of stuff is more than enough and excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Alan. You have a tremendous rest of your day. Always interesting, always informative. Catch his stuff on freightways.com. Please, right now, I think we're going to toss over to Nick Austin, who's got our first taste of weather this